I surprised my wife at the airport with first-class tickets for our anniversary, only to watch her run into another man's arms, thank him for everything, and call me a friend. I left without a word, canceled the trip, froze our accounts, and went home alone. An hour later, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Thomas Calder sat at the edge of his bed at 5:30 in the morning, listening to the furnace kick on. The house was cold. It was always cold in March, even when spring pretended to arrive early in Three Forks, Montana. He could hear Lila breathing softly beside him, still asleep, her face turned away toward the window where frost had gathered in delicate patterns on the glass. 11 years. They'd been married for 11 years. He stood quietly, careful not to wake her, and walked to the kitchen. The coffee maker gurgled to life, filling the silence with a familiar rhythm. Outside, the sky was still dark, but the mountains to the east were beginning to show their edges against the coming dawn. Thomas poured his coffee into a chipped mug that read "World's Okayest Dad," a gag gift from his brother 2 Christmases ago. He wasn't a father. The joke had landed strangely at the time. His phone buzzed on the counter. A reminder he'd set 3 weeks ago. Anniversary trip, confirmed tickets. He swiped it away and opened his email. The confirmation sat there, pristine and official. 2 first-class tickets to Denver, booked for the weekend after next. A nice hotel downtown. Reservations at a restaurant Lila had mentioned once, maybe a year ago, in passing. He'd remembered. Thomas had never bought first-class tickets before. The business had been struggling. 2 contracts fell through last spring, and he'd spent the summer scrambling to keep payroll steady. But they'd survived. Barely. And Lila had been patient through most of it, though her patience had started to fray around the edges lately. "You're not here anymore," she'd said one night in January. They'd been sitting on opposite ends of the couch, the television playing something neither of them was watching. "I mean, you're physically here, but you're not here." He tried to explain. The business, the pressure, the constant mental math of keeping everything afloat. But the words had come out flat, defensive. She'd gone to bed without saying goodnight. So the trip was supposed to fix that, or at least acknowledge it. He wasn't naive enough to think a weekend away would solve everything. But it felt like a gesture, a reset button, a way to show her that he saw the distance between them and wanted to close it. He hadn't told her yet. He wanted it to be a surprise. The coffee tasted bitter. He added more cream. By the time Lila came downstairs, Thomas was already dressed for work. Jeans, a flannel shirt, work boots laced tight. She wore her robe, the blue one with the frayed cuffs, and her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked tired. She'd been looking tired for months. "Morning," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "Morning. Coffee's ready." "Thanks." She poured herself a cup and leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone. The silence between them wasn't hostile. It was worse than that. It was comfortable in its emptiness. Familiar. "About a late day today," Thomas said. "We're finishing the foundation pour on the Henderson site. Might not be back until 7 or 8. Lila nodded without looking up. "Okay, I'll probably grab dinner at my parents' place. Mom's been asking me to come by." "Sure, that's fine." He finished his coffee and set the mug in the sink. On his way out, he paused by the door, boots in hand, and glanced back at her. She was still scrolling, her face lit by the pale blue glow of the screen. "Hey," he said. She looked up. "Love you." She smiled, small and automatic. "Love you too." It was the kind of exchange that happened every day. Routine, safe, meaningless in its repetition. Thomas walked out into the cold, the door clicking shut behind him. The days blurred together. Work consumed him the way it always did. The sound of concrete trucks backing up, the smell of diesel and wet cement, the constant problem-solving that came with managing a crew. He liked the work. It was tangible. You could see what you'd built at the end of the day. At home, things moved in parallel. Lila handled the calendar, dentist appointments, oil changes, her mother's birthday dinner. She was good at that. Organized. Efficient. They functioned like a well-oiled machine, each part doing its job without much communication. But Thomas had started noticing small things. A drawer in the bedroom that used to hold her jewelry was half empty now. He'd opened it one morning looking for spare batteries and found only a few old earrings and a broken watch. When he'd asked about it casually, "Did you move your jewelry somewhere?" She'd said she'd reorganized, put some things in a safe deposit box. He hadn't thought much of it at the time. Then there were the documents. He'd gone looking for their car insurance paperwork and found the file folder nearly empty. Birth certificates, marriage license, car titles, all gone. What he'd asked, Lila had said she was updating their records, scanning everything into the cloud. "It's easier to access that way," she'd explained. "More secure." It made sense. She was always more tech-savvy than he was. But the explanations sat uneasily in his chest, like a stone he couldn't quite swallow. 2 days before the trip, Thomas stopped by his brother's garage on the way home from work. Kevin was under the hood of a '92 Chevy, grease up to his elbows, cursing at a stubborn bolt. "You need a hand?" Thomas asked. Kevin straightened, wiping his hands on a rag that was already filthy. "Nah, just fighting with this fuel pump. Thing's been sitting too long." He grabbed a beer from the mini fridge in the corner and tossed one to Thomas. "What brings you by?" "Nothing. Just thought I'd stop in." Kevin gave him a look. "You don't just stop in." Thomas cracked open the beer and leaned against the workbench. "I'm taking Lila to Denver this weekend. Anniversary trip. First-class tickets, nice hotel. The works." Kevin whistled low. "Damn, business must be doing better. Getting there. She know yet?" "No." Keeping it a surprise. Kevin took a long drink, studying his brother. "Things good between you two?" Thomas hesitated. "They're fine doesn't sound great. It's been a rough year. I've been working a lot. She's been handling everything else. We've been distant. Hence the trip." "Yeah." Kevin set down his beer and picked up a wrench, turning it over in his hands. "You ever worry you're trying too hard to fix something that might not want to be fixed?" The question landed harder than Kevin probably intended. "What's that supposed to mean?" Thomas asked. "Nothing, man. Just, I don't know. Lila seemed off lately. At Mom's birthday last month, she barely said 2 words. Just kept checking her phone." Thomas felt that unease again, sharper this time. "She's been stressed." "Maybe." Kevin shrugged. "I'm probably reading into nothing. Forget I said anything." But Thomas couldn't forget it. The whole drive home, Kevin's words circled in his head like vultures. The airport was crowded for a Thursday afternoon. Thomas arrived early, tickets printed and folded in his jacket pocket, rehearsing how he'd surprise Lila. She thought she was meeting her sister for coffee at a cafe near the terminal, a setup he'd coordinated with Brenna over text. He stood near the security checkpoint, scanning the crowd. His heart beat a little faster than usual. Nervous, maybe, or excited. He wasn't sure. Then he saw her. Lila was standing near the ticketing counter, but she wasn't alone. Grant Heller stood beside her, his hand on the small of her back. Thomas recognized him immediately. Grant had shown up at family barbecues uninvited over the past year, always hovering near the food table, always finding a way to insert himself into conversations. He was divorced, loud about it, always talking about reinventing himself and living authentically. Thomas had found him irritating but harmless. Now, watching Grant lean in close to Lila, whispering something that made her smile, Thomas felt the air leave his lungs. Lila stepped forward and hugged Grant tightly. Not the polite, quick hug you gave an acquaintance. This was intimate, familiar. Her arms wrapped around his shoulders, her face pressed against his neck. "You saved me," she said, loud enough that Thomas could hear from 15 feet away. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Thomas stood frozen. The noise of the airport, rolling suitcases, overhead announcements, crying children, faded into white static. Then Lila saw him. Her entire body went rigid. The color drained from her face. "Oh, hey," she said, her voice pitched too high. She stepped back from Grant, adjusting her purse strap. "Grant was just helping me figure things out." She turned to Grant, gesturing toward Thomas with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "This is Thomas. A friend. A friend." The word didn't explode. It didn't crash. It landed soft and wrong, like a misplaced note in a song. Grant extended his hand. "Hey, man. Nice to meet you." Thomas looked at the hand, then at Lila, then back at Grant. He didn't say a word. He turned and walked toward the exit, each step deliberate and measured. Behind him, he heard Lila call his name, panic threading through her voice. "Thomas, wait. Thomas, please." He didn't look back. The cold air outside hit him like a slap, sharp and clarifying. He walked to his truck, climbed inside, and sat there for a long moment, staring at the steering wheel. The tickets were still in his jacket pocket. First class. A nice hotel. Reservations at the restaurant she'd mentioned. He crumpled them slowly and dropped them on the passenger seat. Then he started the engine and drove home. By the time Thomas pulled into the driveway, his phone had buzzed 17 times. Calls, texts, voicemails piling up. He silenced it and went inside. The house felt different now. Smaller, like the walls had shifted inward while he was gone. He walked through each room slowly, methodically. The kitchen, the living room, the bedroom, the drawer where her jewelry used to be, half empty. The file folder with their important documents, nearly gone. The closet, missing suitcases. This wasn't an affair. This was preparation. Thomas sat on the edge of the bed and let the truth settle over him, heavy and final. Lila hadn't been distant because of stress. She'd been distant because she was already halfway out the door. And Grant wasn't a confidant. He was the exit plan. The phone buzzed again. Another call from Lila. He let it ring through to voicemail, then listened to the message. "Thomas, please. Please pick up. I can explain. It's not what you think. Just, please. We need to talk." Her voice cracked on the last word. He deleted the message. Then he opened his laptop and started making a list. The next evening, headlights swept across the living room window. Thomas was sitting in the dark, drinking water from a glass that had gone warm in his hand. He'd been there for over an hour, thinking through every detail, every conversation, every small moment that now made terrible sense. The doorbell rang. He didn't move. It rang again. Then came the knocking. "Thomas." Lila's voice, muffled through the door. "I know you're in there. Please, just let me explain." Another voice, quieter. "Tom, it's Brenna. Come on, just hear her out." Thomas stood, walked to the door, and opened it. Lila looked wrecked. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face blotchy. Brenna stood beside her, arms crossed, her expression caught between sympathy and frustration. "Thank you," Lila breathed. She moved a step inside, but Thomas didn't move from the doorway. "Say what you need to say from there," he said. Lila froze. "Thomas, please. Here, or not at all." Brenna touched Lila's arm. "Let's just talk, okay? All of us. Like adults." Thomas looked at Brenna. He'd always liked her. She was practical, no nonsense. The kind of person who showed up when you needed help moving furniture or fixing a busted pipe. But right now, her presence felt like interference. "You knew," he said to Brenna. She blinked. "What?" "You helped set up the coffee meetup. You texted me back, confirmed the time. You knew she was meeting Grant." Brenna's face shifted, guilt, defensiveness. I knew she was confused, but I didn't think." "You knew." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Brenna sighed. "Can we please just come inside?" Thomas stepped back and let them in. He didn't offer them seats. They stood in the entryway, awkward and uncertain. Lila spoke first. "I'm sorry." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry." "For what specifically?" Thomas asked. She looked at him, confused. For everything. For hurting you." "Be specific," he said. His voice was calm, measured. "What are you sorry for?" Lila's mouth opened, closed. She looked at Brenna, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. "I had an affair," Lila said finally, "with Grant. It started about 4 months ago, when I was working late." "Yes. And you were planning to leave." Her eyes widened. "How did you?" "The jewelry, the documents, the suitcases. You've been moving things out for weeks." Lila's face crumpled. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I didn't want to hurt you." Thomas felt something cold settle in his chest. "You didn't want to hurt me," he repeated. "But your plan was to empty our accounts and disappear while I was on a work trip?" "No. Yes, but it wasn't like that." "What was it like?" Brenna stepped forward. "Tom, she's trying to tell you she made a mistake. She's trying to apologize." Thomas looked at Brenna. "She planned to take money and vanish." That's not avoiding hurt. That's avoiding accountability. Brenna went quiet. Lila sank onto the arm of the couch, her shoulders shaking. I felt alone, she said between sobs. You were never here. You were always working, always stressed, always somewhere else in your head. I needed someone who listened, who saw me. So you chose Grant. He made me feel, I don't know, like I mattered. Thomas crossed his arms. Did you tell him you're married? Of course. Did you tell him you were planning to leave? Lila hesitated. Yes. And he was fine with it. He said he'd support whatever I decided. Thomas almost laughed. Of course he did. Lila looked up at him, her eyes pleading. I know I messed up. I know. But please, can we try to work through this? Go to counseling or something. I don't want to lose you. Thomas stared at her. For 11 years, he'd known this woman, shared a bed with her, built a life with her. And now, standing in their living room, she felt like a stranger. You didn't cheat once, he said quietly. You reorganized your life around leaving me. Lila opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Brenna spoke instead. People make mistakes, Tom. She's human. She got scared and made bad decisions, but that doesn't mean... Where are the documents? Thomas asked. Lila blinked. What? The birth certificates. Marriage license. Car titles. Where are they? I put them in a safe deposit box. At the bank. Which bank? She hesitated. First National. In Bozeman. Under whose name? Her silence was answer enough. Thomas nodded slowly. You opened a new account. Separate from ours. I was going to tell you. When? After you transferred half our savings. I didn't. Lila stopped herself. Her face told him everything. Brenna looked at her sister, shock registering. Lila, I was scared, Lila said desperately. I didn't know what to do. I thought if I had a plan, I could figure things out, but then I realized I didn't want to leave, and I was going to tell you, I swear. You told Grant I was a friend. The words cut through her explanation like a blade. Lila went silent. At the airport, Thomas continued. You introduced me to the man you're sleeping with as a friend. I panicked. I didn't know what to say. You could have said my husband. Tears streamed down Lila's face, but Thomas felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just a cold, clear certainty. I need you both to leave, he said. Brenna stepped forward. Tom, come on. Now. Lila stood, shaking. Please, can we just get out? His voice didn't rise. It didn't waver. It simply ended the conversation. Brenna guided Lila toward the door, whispering reassurances that Thomas couldn't hear. At the threshold, Lila turned back one more time. I love you, she said. Thomas closed the door. He stood there in the silence, listening to their car pull out of the driveway, and then he walked to the kitchen. He opened his laptop and began making phone calls. First, his bank, then his lawyer. The family divide happened faster than Thomas expected. Lila's parents called 2 days later. Her father, Dale, spoke in that careful, diplomatic tone he used when he thought he was being reasonable. We need to talk about what happened, Dale said. Lila is devastated. She's barely eating, barely sleeping. Whatever went wrong between you two, I think it's worth trying to fix. Thomas was at a job site, overseeing a concrete delivery. He stepped away from the noise. She told you what she did. She told us she made a mistake. That things have been hard between you. Did she tell you about Grant? A pause. She mentioned that there was someone else. But she said it was a cry for help, that she felt abandoned. Thomas looked at the mountains in the distance, their peaks still white with snow. She planned to leave, open separate accounts, move documents. That's not a cry for help. That's premeditation. Thomas, I understand you're hurt. Do you? Another pause, longer this time. She's my daughter. I'm not going to abandon her when she needs support. I'm not asking you to, Thomas said. But don't ask me to pretend this is something it's not. The call ended shortly after. Polite, cordial, broken. His own family was less diplomatic. Kevin came over that weekend with pizza and beer. He didn't ask for details. He just sat with Thomas in the garage, working on a carburetor that didn't need fixing, letting the silence speak for itself. Mom wants to know if you're coming to Sunday dinner, Kevin said eventually. Lila going to be there? I don't know. Probably not. Then yeah, I'll be there. Kevin nodded. Good. They worked in silence for another hour. When Kevin finally left, he clapped Thomas on the shoulder. You need anything, you call me. Anytime. Thanks. I mean it. Thomas believed him. The group chats went silent. The big family thread that used to buzz with memes and dinner plans and arguments about whose turn was to host Thanksgiving. Nothing. Radio silence. Private messages started coming instead. From Brenna. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I thought she'd work it out on her own. From Lila's mother. Please consider counseling. For both of your sakes. From an aunt he barely knew. Marriage is hard. Don't give up too quickly. Thomas didn't respond to any of them. He focused on structure, on the things he could control. He separated their finances, moving his paycheck into a new account. He documented everything: text messages, emails, bank statements. He took photos of the half-empty drawer, the missing documents, the gaps in the closet where suitcases used to be. Then he called his lawyer and filed for divorce. He didn't warn Lila, didn't give her a chance to prepare or protest. The papers were served to her at her parents' house on a Tuesday afternoon. She called him an hour later, sobbing. How could you do this? She asked. I thought we were going to try. You thought wrong, Thomas said. But you didn't even give me a chance to. You had chances. You had months to tell me the truth. Instead, you planned an escape. I made a mistake. No, Thomas said, his voice steady. You made a series of decisions. Each one calculated. Each one designed to protect yourself. Not us. You. Lila's sobs filled the silence on the other end of the line. I'm not doing this to hurt you, Thomas said. I'm doing this because it's the only honest thing left. He hung up. That night, he sat at the kitchen table and looked at the anniversary tickets he'd crumpled and forgotten in his truck. He smoothed them out, staring at the dates, the confirmation numbers, the promise of something that would never happen. Then he threw them in the trash. Grant Heller disappeared 3 weeks after the divorce was filed. Thomas heard about it from Kevin, who'd heard it from Brenna, who'd heard it from Lila. She's freaking out, Kevin said. They were sitting at a diner off Highway 287, splitting a plate of fries neither of them was really eating. Called him like 50 times. He's not answering. Changed his number, apparently. Thomas took a sip of coffee. It was lukewarm, bitter. Where'd he go? She thinks Oregon. Maybe Washington. He posted something on social media about new beginnings and then deactivated everything. Huh. Kevin studied his brother. You don't seem surprised. I'm not. Why not? Thomas shrugged. Guys like Grant don't stick around when things get complicated. He wanted the fun part. The thrill. Once there's consequences, he's gone. Cold. Accurate. Kevin pushed the fries away. Lila's a mess. Brenna says she's barely functioning. Won't leave her parents' place. Thomas didn't respond. He stared out the window at the parking lot, watching a family load groceries into their SUV. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, dropped her stuffed animal and started crying. Her father picked it up, brushed it off, handed it back with a smile. You feel bad at all? Kevin asked quietly. Thomas looked at him. For what? I don't know. For how things turned out. Thomas thought about it. Really thought about it. No, he said finally. I didn't choose this. She did. Yeah, but I gave her 11 years. I worked my ass off to build something stable. She chose to blow it up. That's not on me. Kevin nodded slowly. Fair enough. They sat in silence for a while longer. When the check came, Thomas paid. Outside, the air was warming. Spring was finally arriving, tentative and fragile. You coming to Easter at Mom's? Kevin asked. Yeah, why wouldn't I? Just checking. They drove home, separately. The divorce hearing was scheduled for early May. Thomas arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in a clean shirt and jeans. He didn't own a suit. Never needed one. His lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Webb, met him in the hallway. She carried a briefcase that looked older than Thomas and spoke in clipped, efficient sentences. Settlement offer came through this morning, she said, handing him a folder. She's asking for spousal support, 50% of marital assets and the house. Thomas read through the document. His jaw tightened. She wants the house. She claims she has more emotional attachment to it. I built that house. Literally. I poured the foundation myself. Patricia nodded. I'm aware. We'll counter. She has no legal grounds for spousal support given the circumstances, and the asset split will favor you based on the evidence of financial misconduct. What about the account she opened? We'll address that. She's required to disclose all assets. If she hides anything, it'll work in your favor. Thomas closed the folder. How's she going to spin this? Confused, overwhelmed, misled. Patricia's expression was neutral. Classic strategy. Make herself the victim. Will it work? Not if I do my job. Inside the courtroom, Lila sat with her lawyer, a younger man in an ill-fitting suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Lila's eyes were red, her hands folded tightly in her lap. When Thomas walked in, she glanced at him, then quickly looked away. The hearing itself was procedural, dry. The judge reviewed documents, asked questions, listened to arguments. Lila's lawyer tried to frame her as someone who'd been emotionally neglected, who'd made a mistake in a moment of weakness. Patricia dismantled it calmly. She presented the bank records showing the separate account, the timeline of missing documents and jewelry, the text messages between Lila and Grant that Lila's lawyer clearly hadn't seen coming. The judge's expression never changed, but Thomas could tell. The evidence told a cleaner story than Lila's tears ever could. When it was over, the judge awarded Thomas the house, the majority of the assets, and declined to grant spousal support. Mrs. Calder, the judge said, looking at Lila over his reading glasses, I understand that marriages fail for complex reasons, but the evidence suggests a pattern of financial planning that undermines your claim of impulsive behavior. I'm ruling in favor of the petitioner. Lila's face crumpled. Her lawyer put a hand on her shoulder, murmuring something Thomas couldn't hear. Thomas stood and walked out. In the hallway, Patricia shook his hand. Clean outcome. You should be satisfied. I am. If she contests, we'll deal with it. But I doubt she will. Why not? Because she knows she'll lose. Patricia snapped her briefcase shut. Take care of yourself, Mr. Calder. Thomas walked to his truck and sat in the driver's seat for a long moment. The courthouse behind him, the mountains ahead. He felt nothing. Not triumph. Not relief. Just a quiet, settled calm. It was over. A year passed. Thomas found himself at Riverside Elementary on a Friday evening in April, attending a fundraiser for his niece's school. Kevin's daughter, Emma, was in third grade and obsessed with science. The fundraiser featured student projects, volcanoes, solar systems, plant growth experiments. Thomas walked through the gymnasium, hands in his pockets, nodding at familiar faces. Some people smiled. Some avoided eye contact. The drama had cooled, but it lingered in the air like smoke you couldn't quite see. He stopped at Emma's table. She'd built a model of the water cycle using plastic bottles and food coloring. Uncle Thomas, she said, grinning. Look, it actually works. He watched the condensation form, the droplets fall. That's pretty cool, kiddo. Dad says you might help me build a robot next year. Maybe, if you're good. She rolled her eyes. I'm always good. Kevin appeared, holding 2 paper cups of punch. He handed one to Thomas. Thanks for coming. Wouldn't miss it. They stood together, watching Emma explain her project to a group of parents. Somewhere behind them, Thomas heard a voice he recognized. Lila. She was talking to one of the teachers, something about volunteer schedules. Thomas didn't turn around. Didn't need to. Kevin noticed. You okay? Yeah. She's been working here part-time, helping with admin stuff. Thomas nodded. He'd heard. Small town. People talked. You ever talked to her? Kevin asked. No. Think you will. Thomas watched Emma carefully adjust her model, her tongue sticking out in concentration. No point. Lila's voice grew closer. He could feel her presence before he saw her, that familiar awareness that comes from years of sharing space with someone. She walked past him toward the exit. She was thinner than he remembered. Her hair was shorter. She moved with her head down, eyes focused on the floor. She didn't look at him. He didn't look at her. And that was fine. Later that night, Thomas sat on the porch of his house, with a beer and the sound of crickets filling the darkness. The air was warm. Summer was coming. He thought about the year that had passed, the quiet evenings, the job sites, the dinners with Kevin and Emma, the slow, steady work of building a life that didn't revolve around someone else's choices. He thought about Lila, working part-time, living smaller than she'd imagined. He felt no satisfaction in it, no vindication, just a distant acknowledgement that consequences existed. He thought about Grant, wherever he was, probably repeating the same patterns with someone new. And he thought about himself, about the man who'd walked out of that airport without looking back, who'd documented everything, who'd filed first, who'd refused to apologize for expecting honesty. People had asked him, over the course of the year, if he'd forgiven her. He hadn't. They'd asked if he'd move on. He had. The difference mattered. Forgiveness would have required revisiting the wound, turning it over, examining it until it made sense or hurt less. Moving on just required walking forward. Thomas finished his beer and went inside. The house was quiet, clean. He locked the door, turned off the lights, and went to bed. For the first time in a long time, his peace didn't depend on anyone else choosing him. It depended on him choosing himself. And that was enough.